What's going on, everybody? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and I always feel like I'm very good at getting my point across. However, sometimes I realize that that's not the case. I look back on something I've said, and maybe I wasn't the clearest thing about it and all as well. But right now, I feel like I have the perfect opportunity to clarify something that I have firmly and adamantly believed, but I may not have got the point across very clearly, if you will. Now, with the 20th anniversary of the PlayStation 2 just being the other day, I feel like this is the perfect example to do so. And the reason for that is, well, we'll talk about that now. So, like I said, the reason for this is because the PlayStation 2, part of the sixth generation of consoles made up by the Sega Dreamcast, the PlayStation 2, the original OG Xbox 180, and the Nintendo GameCube, is what I consider the truly great last console generation. Obviously, we have the likes of the 7th generation consoles with the Nintendo Wii, the Xbox 360, and the PlayStation 3, and the 8th generation of consoles with the Wii U, the Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4. And of course, the 9th generation with the Nintendo Switch, the upcoming Xbox Series X. Yes, I'm using its real name, because for once, I'm trying to be serious about this. And the PlayStation 5. Now, it's no secret whatsoever that I prefer PC gaming. I consider myself a gamer overall. I play all different platforms, and I'm very, very critical of many of these platforms' shortcomings, which is why PC is my favorite platform. It gives me the best experience overall. But I don't want to miss out on certain games that I'm going to love and enjoy just because they're limited to one piece of hardware. That's why I have a Switch for Nintendo exclusives. And that's why I have a PlayStation for PlayStation exclusives. In theory, that's why I had an Xbox, but we know how that went. Now, anyone who's been around me for the last, well, probably a couple of years at this point, hell, maybe even since I started YouTube, because that was into the 8th console generation. Everyone knows, or at least you should have picked up on it by now, that I am very, very harsh and very, very critical about the current generation of consoles, what could potentially be the next generation of consoles, as well as the previous generation of consoles, specifically the 7th, not all consoles prior. And the reason for that ties back into the 6th generation of consoles and how I consider them to be the last truly great generation of consoles. Because everything back then was working properly within its limitations. Not only did we have all the new stuff that the likes of the 7th generation ushered in with broken games and patches and patches and patches, the new practices of shoehorning in DLC, ripping out content, nickel and diming, microtransactions, loot boxes, which of course was extrapolated on with the 8th generation as technology and gaming and all went forward. But a lot of the times, or the vast, vast majority of the times, in the 6th generation and everything prior, I don't know if everyone knows this because it feels like many people out there only started gaming over the last 2 generations. But back then, the 6th generation, damn I sound old, the 5th generation, whatever it is, these games were designed properly around the hardware. The extreme, overwhelming vast majority of these games targeted and achieved 60 frames per second. They controlled better and they still looked good for what they could do. However, because of the 7th generation that jumped to HD visuals, which in my opinion was far, far too early, based on the hardware available for consoles at the time at least, it absolutely tanked the frame rate for marginal gains. Games became sluggish, choppy, unresponsive, frustrating to play. And then of course you factor in all the other stuff like the DLC, the broken games, the patches, etc., which have only gotten worse going through the 7th generation and all the way through the 8th generation. You can see why I say I hate the last 2 console generations. I hate console gaming from the 7th and 8th generation. They've lowered the quality bar so much and it's just been accepted for some reason. Do 1 or 2 fantastic games every so often nullify this? No, not at all. I love Persona 5. It's one of the greatest games I've ever played. I will loudly and proudly say that game's name in the same breath that I will say with the likes of Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Shenmue, Persona 4, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. But does one almost masterpiece JRPG of recent memory nullify all these problems and render them completely invalid? No, not at all. And what we've had since then is a culture that has been saying this is okay. And this disheartens me as someone who has been around for the good old times, the best times, the better times, the golden era, the silver era, even the bronze era. When it comes to gaming, they were all so much better in every way. And now, for some reason, people are defending all of this. And this really, really disheartens me. I'll say it again one more time. This is why I am so vehemently against 7th and 8th generation consoles. What they have become, what gaming has become, what console gaming has become, and the limitations, even forced on PC, because of this. So yes, I do hate console gaming when it comes to the 7th, 8th, and I can't fully say the 9th generation, but we'll go with the Switch, that's included. Where, thanks to a combination of poor hardware limitations and poor software development choices, they've frankly been punching above their weight and failing miserably at it. Now, there's a flip side of this. With the supposed, or at least, well, rumoured and leaked and whatnot, and on paper, performance and power of the next generation upcoming consoles from Sony and Microsoft, there is a chance that what used to be the proper norm and what should be the proper norm and has been the standard for literally decades will be making a return to consoles. Now, console gaming will never overtake PC gaming for me, but it can come in a close second if done correctly. Now, this may require a 500 or 600 euro box, but if all these promises that these console makers, these manufacturers, if everything they're saying and claiming is true, or at least close to being true, you will have games running at high native resolutions and high quality visual graphics, effects, etc., textures, all of that. And of course, extremely, if not the most important one, is also at a high frame rate. 60 frames per second should be the bare minimum that should be allowed for all of this. Developers have thrown around stuff like 120, 240 frames per second as well. It's hard to comment on that and take it seriously, especially when we know how historically console marketing has gone. 4K anyone? 60 FPS anyone? But with the current landscape of hardware and what consoles have shifted to, with the likes of x86 based architecture, with the Ryzen CPUs and the Navi GPUs, there is serious potential for everything to get back on track. To get all these people who over the last maybe 12 to 15 years have become brainwashed by the publishers, the manufacturers, the developers, to accept such objectively low quality. Something that I consider arguably ridiculously, unfathomably low compared to the several decades of what was the gold standard. So yes, I do hope that the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are very powerful machines. I do hope that they come close, if not deliver or even exceed what they promise. And sure, while we'll never get rid of always online games and DRM, DLC and season passes and shit like that, we can get some of the most important things back. The overall experience, the quality in both visuals and most importantly, playable frame rate at the same time. So when it comes to the 9th generation of consoles from Sony and Microsoft, I just want to say one thing. #make consoles great again.